You're listening to the StudioPTBO podcast, where we talk all things marketing to help you build and grow your business online. Welcome to the latest episode.
And welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we're back at it again. Feels good to say those words once more. Today is a great day because I've headed into a long weekend. So the fact that we're talking about time off is very suitable for the conversation. But before we get to time off, I want to just do one of these. Yo, how you doing? Things are good?
Excellent, Cody, man. I just came off a staycation last week where I got to relax a lot and rest and do a lot of canoeing and soul searching. And yeah, it's good for the soul, definitely. And I've gotten better at it over the last few years. You've gotten a lot better at it over the last few months. And we're really going to, delve a little deeper on that today's show with John Fitch, who's the co-author of Time Off, which is really a guide to resting. It's, sort of finding success without stress in life. And, welcome to the show, John. We're really pleased to have you on today.
Well, first of all, the energy you brought me in here totally beats the cappuccino I just had. So I didn't even need the cappuccino with how y'all start this off.
I can blow that horn a couple more times. It'll fire you up.
That's great. We
do have a lot of energy and passion for life and helping entrepreneurs and business. But we have become, and especially Cody, I've been around the game longer than Cody has, and Cody's become a lot more mindful and self-aware in the last few months around, mental health, physical health, taking breaks, not being a workaholic, focusing more on quality of time, delegating more, empowering other people more, automating. But John, was there, you were kind of a former workaholic, I guess might be a way to describe you.
Very accurate.
Was there kind of a defining moment for you, or did it sort of happen over time? Was it like a build up to some kind of breakdown or cathartic moment where you're like, I can't do this anymore?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that to hold space for me. I'll speak my story, and my collaborators on the book, Max Frenzel, co-author, and our illustrator, Maria Suzuki. All three of us had different moments. I'll talk briefly about theirs and then mine. Max, who has a PhD in quantum physics, he's an AI expert, really amazing intellect as well as creative. He was all about time off for a long time. In fact, in the middle of his thesis, he was the most time off centric and produced his thesis paper to get his PhD. He was very proud of that. And then he got lost in the busyness soon after. And so he had a moment where he realized, wait, why don't I feel as productive as I used to? And then he remembered the importance of time off. Maria Suzuki, our illustrator, an amazing artist, and just has a way with illustrating images. And she did a lot of the artwork in our book. Her moment was realizing she had fallen out of love with drawing. It was because her quantity of clients had reached a point that wasn't healthy for her. So she had to reassess that. And that then brings me to me. Mine was a different path. I naively got into software development when the iPhone came out. And I've been original in my thought for so many other vectors of my life. But for some reason, I was just super dogmatic in the belief that the only way to be successful in software was to work the most. So you mentioned quality time. I only saw it as quantity. So I was kind of obsessed with this idea of quantity of input equaled quality of output, which is not true. And our book dives into proving that. But ultimately, I had a very humbling week in my life where all in 1 week I lost a longtime partner that I was romantically involved with, and my startup failed all in 1 week. And I was in a very low place and had to assess what had contributed to that. And now it wasn't like in 1 week I suddenly had all that happen. Of course, this was accumulating over time.
Right.
But I just reached a breaking point, And why I told all three of those stories of us creators behind the book is I think each person out there could relate to one of those. You either had started off being all about your rest and time off, and then maybe you lost sight of it. And maybe you're like me, type A, just go, 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 and saw time off as a weakness. Or maybe you're like Maria and you're feeling a lack of enthusiasm in your craft. In either case, I think all of those help us revisit what is our relationship to work and what is our relationship to leisure. And ultimately why we set out to write time off is there's a bunch of books out there about work ethic. I'm sure y'all could give a recommendation list longer than mine, but Max and I came up with this term rest ethic. And we liked that, but there wasn't a lot of books about it. And so we decided to write time off, because if you look at that word ethic being attached to it, to me, that denotes that it's intentional, it's protected, it's deliberate, it's honorable. And so I definitely had a breaking point that helped me reassess. And then luckily enough, I had some mentors and some really mind-blowing life experiences afterwards that not only helped me heal my relationship to leisure and time off, but it made me double down in realizing that my rest is more important actually than my work, and wanted to write a book to help support that.
Yeah. I really liked your book. Like, it was like, and this is coming from somebody like, I identify it like with you in regards to the entrepreneur that, just at points couldn't turn it off. And I didn't really understand why I couldn't turn it off. And I was, working, 80, 90-hour weeks. And I felt like I was getting frustrated by the fact that we weren't going any faster. And it wasn't until I went to, and I'm going to equate this back to your book, because like, I really, like when I started out the actual podcast, I really meant that about the time off, I'm going into a long weekend, starting to plan more rest and more recovery. So it's really interesting. We chat a lot about this, Neil and I, on the podcast about automate, delegate, remove, and how entrepreneurs, if they were just to actually take a list of 20 things and really begin to delegate and automate and actually systematize the things that aren't needle moving activities in their business, they can go faster. So I'm really curious to know, John, as I was going through your book, I'm just really curious, because I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the same boat around, and I love the use of the word, rest ethic. But I find that oftentimes within the entrepreneurial world, the idea of hustle culture is very prominent. But the other element behind that is, a lot of entrepreneurs that we speak to is like, I can't shut it off. Like, what advice would you have for the entrepreneur that says, I struggle to shut it off? Like, how do they actually implement, and what are some key tactics? Like, give us 3 key tactics that an entrepreneur can implement in order to action rest ethic.
Love that. Thank you. And this is me also speaking to a former version of myself. If 5 years ago me were to call me and said, hey, give me some advice, this is what I would give. So great prompt. So first is the most powerful chapter for me while writing it, the real aha moment, was when we looked at Graham Wallace's work, which is about 100 years old, a theory on the stages, the phases of creativity. And I'll briefly summarize those and there's 4 of them. You have preparation, incubation, illumination, verification. Those 2 on the outside, preparation, verification, that's work as we know it. On the laptop, in the inbox, making things happen, writing code, designing software, doing marketing, making sales, the actual do, the hustle. That's those 2. We need them. That's your work ethic. You got to get things done, all about it. But notice that that's only 50%. These 2 right here, incubation and illumination, only occur by stepping away from the actual thing you're working on. Incubation, as it sounds, is like marinating. So it's actively detaching from the task. And then in that detachment, allowing the subconscious and a bunch of other neurological functions that I'm not qualified to speak to the specifics, but they are real. And there's an entire body of work and study about our subconscious being this amazing collaborator, eventually that incubation leads to illumination. And as that word may sound like, you can think about it as simple as that light bulb moment, that epiphany. And we're now in a knowledge economy, a creative economy, where I think we're all fueled by epiphanies and better ideas. And so I think what helps in looking at through the lens of the 4 stages of the creative process, we're at any moment in one of those stages regarding your project. It goes through that internal season, if you will. And so I replaced my own story in my mind that, sure, it says time off, but I don't mean like fully off. What I mean is, don't just think that being busy and actively working on the task is the only way. As I mentioned, it's only 50%. That's just verification and preparation work. Whereas those 2 middle pieces, that detachment is actually in favor of your work. It's you're still working on it, but it doesn't feel like it. So when you're canoeing, or maybe you're doing yoga, or you have a silent retreat, or you're getting lost in a hobby of yours, or having a wine with a dear friend, as long as you're not actively working on the task, you're now activating incubation and the potential of illumination, which will allow you to do better work, have a better quality idea, filter out what isn't working. And so once I had a new language for looking at my entrepreneurial processes through those 4 phases, I no longer felt weak. I no longer felt guilty when, quote, taking time off from the work. I saw it as like, if I'm to give, and people can use this boilerplate, I usually say, I'm going out fishing for epiphanies, or I'm going to go do X activity for a better idea, or to have more clarity. I know we've all had those light bulb moments. And to me, that's the art of a rest ethic, is not only allowing yourself to recharge and build up enthusiasm, but that detachment activates these really amazing parts of our non-conscious focus. And to me, it's like an awesome collaborator, because creativity is not only connecting dots, it's connecting distant dots. And we have to detach to make that happen. So the first is, you deserve rest. But if you're still type A like me, and it sounds like both of you still have a bit of that as well, I now fearlessly and with a lot of pride lean into my time off, because I know it's a crucial component of my own creative process.
Yeah, we Cody and I are wired exactly like you, and his question was very astute. That, I've sort of found, I go to the cottage, I go canoeing 3 or 4 hours, and I sort of off the grid, relax, think about life, don't think about business. But it is hard. It's really hard when you're wired to think about business and innovation and pushing things and momentum, to dial it off. And my wife's always on me for that, and my friends are, and I'm on Cody for that he's got to get better at it, and he is. But it's just being very self-aware and mindful and learning different disciplines. I have to ask you, John, you talked at one point about don't confuse busyness with productivity. I think we're taught by a lot of companies, we're trained to think that they do go hand in hand. And I guess, A, I want you to address that, but B, how do you think we sort of managed to rewire our thought around that during the pandemic? Because I think in many respects, the silver lining is it's been a game changer in how many companies approach productivity. So maybe start with where we were at and sort of what you think has shifted in the pandemic.
First of all, y'all are awesome. I could sit here for hours talking with you. There's half of me that's like, well, dang, they don't even need the book. They kind of already understand this. So anyway, a real joy to speak with you. Love your energy and questions. Yeah. So there's this concept at the beginning of the book. We kind of zoom out at a high altitude, looking at humanity's history of our relationship to work and leisure, and looking at the different phases of our relationship to time and the different eras of work that presented themselves. And we do that to set up our argument and our amazing vision, our exciting vision of the future of work. And what you're alluding to in the book, we do an analysis of this contagious social construct of visible busyness. Mm-hmm. Now, visible busyness served us well many, many, many years ago, when the bleeding edge of technology was assembly lines and human beings being super important components of basically any manufacturing function, right? And so, yeah, if what you're doing as a human is, contributing this part to this car, this Ford vehicle, let's say, in the era of the early eras of the car, then if you're not busy, you're not doing something, it was not only visibly obvious, but it was bad for the supply chain. And so it served a purpose at a given time. We now, obviously, many breakthroughs, and thanks to Moore's law and other accelerations, sure that humans are still involved in supply chains. I think they will be for some time, but we're seeing the clear pattern that more and more of that mundane and robotic work is being replaced, not only because it's more efficient, but it's also more effective. Like anything mundane and repetitive and precise, human beings are pretty terrible at. We're messy, but our messiness makes us creative and empathetic and all these soft skills that we don't know how to automate yet. But that visible busyness comes from a long time ago, and our context has changed for most of us that work in the creative economy or the knowledge economy. But what we forgot to unlearn was this visible busyness, right? You're in an office with a badge of honor. You want to be the last one leaving, the first one showing up, and you want to be the person responding the fastest to emails. And so we took this concept of visible busyness from the industrial age, and somehow it just naturally, that dogma carried over to the knowledge economy and creative economy. And look, there's nuances where my point of view may not have merit, but for the most part, all I'm asking is, why are we still operating that way? Whereas it's a different context. And I think, to your point about the pandemic, what it made us realize is, oh, wait, I'm speaking for myself, and maybe this resonates with someone watching right now, or both of you. Me not doing business travel not only gave me a lot of time back. That time I've been able to translate into more meaningful, deep work in my verification and preparation work. But I've also now had more flexibility to lean into my rest ethic and my hobbies. And what's really cool is I can do a virtual workshop or a virtual coaching session or a design session. And now that I'm working from home, immediately after, like literally 5 minutes later, I'm out the door with my dogs outside doing something. Whereas previously I didn't have that luxury, because I somehow, along with a bunch of other people, believed that the only way we could get meaningful work done was in person, watching each other be busy. So that's one element. And the second is I think if people haven't been able to improve their relationship to autonomy with time and detaching from visible busyness, I know some people, it's actually gotten worse because now they are billowed in notifications, whether they're using Slack or a group messaging tool, where that visible busyness presents itself in a virtual context, which is, look at me, I'm responding at 1 a.m. to messages. And so to me, telling the story in the book is simply to help people zoom out far enough to go, oh, wait, why are we still operating like cogs in a wheel? Like it made sense when we were at the birth of the automobile industry and the industrial age, but many automations later, I think we deserve to revisit that construct and unsubscribe from parts of it that aren't serving us anymore.
I agree with that, and I had to throw that in there, and I'm gonna probably start throwing these in more to more of the Studio PTBO podcast. I like what you said about 1 a.m. responses, because we work in a client-facing business where I have to tell my team that our office hours are 9 to 5. And it's setting expectations with clients, is letting them know that, hey, we're going to try to respond as quick as possible, but I'm not going to respond to you at 1 in.m. And I want to transition because I want your thought perspective on sleep, because I think sleep and time off have a really, they go hand in hand. They say, I think the stat is like 1 of 3 people suffer with insomnia. And I think a lot of it has to do with like phones I'm curious to know, I read Ariana Huffington's Sleep Revolution. There's a lot of science that goes behind that. I'm curious what your thoughts are on sleep and any key tactics that you have specifically for entrepreneurs to shut it off, to make sure they get the good amount of sleep. What are your thoughts on sleep?
And sorry, just interject here quickly before John answers this, because he also did a chapter on LeBron James, which I found fascinating, that LeBron James religiously, he calls it the recovery phase. Yep. Sleep is just as important as anything else he does with his day in terms of obviously exercise, training, food. But I just want to add that as well, that recovery phase, how vital it is. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, John.
No, great point. LeBron's profile is one of my favorites because I have that. I'm physically, I'm not a LeBron James. I wouldn't consider myself an athlete, but I'm a creative athlete. And I took a lot of inspiration from that profile. And you're right. Him and Mike Mancias, his coach, sleep they take it as serious as the reps of the free throw shots. So I would say our chapter on sleep, we've got about a dozen deep dives in the book that consider the different forms of time off. And it was kind of we have to do one on sleep, which may be the most amazing form of time off. And there's a stat in that book that we reference that human beings are the only creature in nature that sleep deprive themselves. That just to me is a humbling thing to go, wait, what? Sleep is very important, not only for performance, as we mentioned in the book. It's if you are hoping for a miracle drug, it's the closest thing we have to it in our reality. And sleep is one of those things that is complicated to understand in a personal context. Again, our chapter on sleep is a great introduction to revisit your relationship to it, as well as some practical tips. But I have to give credit to not only Ariana Huffington's book, but also Dr. Matthew Walker, who has spent his entire life studying sleep. Highly recommend. I think his book is titled Why We Sleep. He has a bunch of podcast interviews too. If you want to go deep on the sleep game, definitely look up Dr. Cool. Matthew Walker. And we curated some of his most interesting findings in our context. I think there's a really awesome, I was not as optimistic a couple of weeks ago, but I did the Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, their big developer conference for app developers, and they did it all virtual this year and did a really good job. And in their updates for what's coming in iOS 14, I believe, both on the phone and Apple Watch, is a sleep application. There's third-party applications that have attempted it, but I think given their ecosystem and being able to just bake that into the Apple Watch app is not only really exciting, but it summarizes my greatest high-level advice, which is each person has to design his or her own. And we even say this in the book, and Apple's literally using the same language, called a wind down practice, a wind down schedule. Why I say that each person has to subjectively design it is that each one of us has different chronotypes. So some of us need to sleep in later versus some of us need to get up before the sun. That's highly subjective. And your intuition should know better. I would be ignorant to say, hey, everyone should go to bed super early and wake up super early. Whereas in Dr. Walker's work, as well as my beliefs, is you just have to find your window, but you have to be consistent. In Dr. Walker's work, one of the contributors to messing up your sleep pattern is by neglecting a discipline of like when you go to sleep and when you wake up. Because what happens if you don't get sleep, you build up what Dr. Walker calls sleep pressure. And sleep pressure is not good. It totally messes up your ability to think, to stay calm, to regulate emotions. Your immune system is highly compromised. I mean, there's some really crazy stats that we use in the book that, like right now, everyone listening, would you allow everyone on your team to operate all week long, technically drunk? If your answer to that question is yes, well, then I guess you should be all about sleep deprivation too. But if your answer is no, then know that if the person is not getting proper sleep, then they are basically operating in a more of an inebriated state in terms of their decision making and emotion regulation. But having a wind down schedule is really huge. And what that looks like for me is making sure that I shut down the devices. My partner, she's really great at this because her eyes are really sensitive. And so 3 hours before we plan to go to bed, there's no devices. It's like these Himalayan salt lamps or candlelight. And it just not only feels nice, but it allows me to wind down. I'm also starting to do this like energy work where I do these meditations where I have this visualization where I take everything in my to-do list in my mind and I literally visually store it like in this safe vault, lock it up. And that visualization.
Compartmentalize, right?
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah.
And it's like a new structure you have to find, but you're disciplining yourself to change your mindset around that portion of your day, and it becomes the new normal. And it's very liberating and empowering, isn't it?
Totally.
I should add at a larger level, I think it's cool that Apple's doing this, that they're baking this in the app, like you said, because it actually is making it almost cool to rest more, right? Yeah. It almost fits with the zeitgeist of the world we are now sort of transitioning into, for lack of a better word, due to the pandemic and what's going on right now. And like I said, it's been empowering a lot of ways. So I think it's really cool that they're doing this, that they're not saying you have to, go through, check your phone 24/7, work your ass off, that dial it down, turn it off, do other things. And maybe at some level, it'll be, like I said, become part of the zeitgeist and pop culture. I want to touch on one more thing. I know we have to wrap things up soon, but how I have a lot of trouble, and Cody does too, saying no. So whether it's being a volunteer, being on boards, getting involved with causes, I have a hell of a time saying no. I'm getting better at it. John, how are you now with saying no and compared to where you were at, and what's the best approach to take?
And then maybe give, because entrepreneurs get we get asked a lot of things, like, and I know that anyone listening to this podcast can probably agree that we get pulled left and right. Like, yes. What are some key tactics that you essentially can give to our audience to help them understand how they say no as well?
Yeah,
love it.
Good point.
I love it. I'll just start shooting straight, Texas style. So,
all right.
Agreed. No is probably my favorite application of all time, and that application doesn't involve any code. It's just a word. First is building your own templates, your own boilerplate of how you gracefully say no. So I think just a hard no can be taken bad from somebody. So having these very poetic ways you design, I know there's probably some templates you could Google to get started, but I have several nice ways of saying no, where I make sure the person feels heard for the invitation, but I also use it as an opportunity to promote what it is I'm focused on. Mm-hmm. And if they aren't supportive, well, then I should probably revisit if they are a friend or not. So that's first, is develop your graceful no's. I'm going to reference some wisdom in the book through some of our profiles. Seth Godin, who most of us know, marketing genius and just prolific blogger and writer. He advises having a more of and a less of list. And you could do this weekly, monthly, annually. Basically, just take a sheet of paper, write down the center. And on one side is things you want more of in life. That could be emotions, it could be types of people you're with, types of work. You decide, what brings you the most meaning. That should be on the more of side. On the other side, the less of is documenting the things that drain you, the things that take away meaning, things that aren't really aligned with your soul and your being. And that list, once you do it, just have it in front of you. And anytime you have an opportunity presented to yourself, you put it through that filter, and that helps me say no to a lot of things. What I start realizing is a lot of the opportunities coming to me are on the less of list. So it makes it very easy for me, and it allows me to shut off the FOMO, because I'm able to say, well, that doesn't really align with what I'm trying to have more of in my life. And then the last one is another great author that he's an entrepreneur as well, Derek Sivers. He has a book coming, I think it just came out, and it's called Hell Yeah or No.
I love that title.
Yeah. And his philosophy is, if in your gut, if the opportunity is not like a hell yeah or an F yeah or whatever enthusiastic word you want to use in front of yeah, if it's not that, it's literally no. And it's a bit more of a contrarian, brutal process, but I have been using it specifically if I'm in the middle of like a very deep work project, like the last month or so, or wrapping up the book Time Off. I adopted that philosophy, and it was super helpful. And so I think a combination of those three would be a solid starting point for a toolkit, because one allows you to document what's meaningful, what's not. That's just good to do anyway on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. The hell yeah or no can, if you're indecisive, it can really help you be decisive. And then lastly, you can get rid of the guilt by gracefully finding ways to say no. So those three would be my recommendations that have served me well.
John, this has been a ton of fun. This has been like, there's definitely an energy in like the virtual room right now.
Yeah.
Of just.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
And both of you can shoot back real fast at me. In whether you just took time off or you're about to have some intentional time off, can you speak to what value that provides you?
It helps me bring clarity to, like, again, like I've been on it. For me, this has been a shorter journey than probably Neil. I was a workaholic. Like, I was working 80 to 90 hours a week, and it wasn't until I began to automate, delegate, and remove things that I kind of had an epiphany back in February that, like, I was burning out, and I know I was burning out. And this is kind of an opportunity. So that, like, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, taking 4 days off is an opportunity for me to rest, for me to not really think about work. Because I've delegated things, I have my key point person, Jairus, is going to take, he's kind of listening in behind the scenes. He's taking care of a lot of the things. It's like, for me, it's like a rest and recharge opportunity where I can come back, at 110% again. It's like I'm feeling the tank slowly get it, slowly. I'm at that point where I haven't had a break in 90 days. And now it's 90 days. I'm trying to strategically plan out every 90 days, I need a break. Every 90 days, I need a break. I think that the corporate has done a good job at building out things over 90 days. For me, it's a rest, a recovery, and a recharge.
Love it. And I wish you many epiphanies during then.
Thank you, sir. And
for me, it's just a lifetime of being in this journey. I'm older than Cody. I've been through this, and just life experience that I know when I have to just take time off. It's just, you just build up that sort of inner strength to just know self-awareness check. And it just gives me perspective and gratitude for other things in life, like canoeing, which is my great love. And it's becoming even a greater love. So yeah, that's really just knowing that the brain, my mind is so wired always that I've just got to dial it down sometimes. And it's like a muscle, right? And it needs to relax sometimes too. It can't always be lifting, and just like chill and work out the arms canoeing instead of the. So yeah. Very good question though, John. Back at us. It's just for me, like, just perspective and gratitude. And I have to echo what Cody said. Like, I feel like I've known you forever, man. It's like you're a soulmate. It's weird. Like, we have that energy sometimes with our guests that we really have the same perspective. And your book, the book was really reinforced a lot for me, taught me new stuff. And I have to say, as someone who appreciates design a lot, it was really well packaged. The cover was great. The color palette, the illustrations.
We've got a canoe on the back, actually.
Yeah.
That's what he really liked.
Yeah,
he really liked the canoe. That's what got him.
Yeah, you did that. You did that for me. But just the whole package was really well put together, and the book itself, it felt serenity, kind of, and peaceful and calm. So I like that everyone thought through that. So I guess I'll let you, Cody, wrap up. But enormous gratitude for having you on the show.
Enormous gratitude. If somebody was looking for more information about you, about your colleagues, where's the best place to reach them? Reach you?
Yeah, sure. If you want to check out that book with those awesome illustrations on it, timeoffbook.com. But you'll find me on LinkedIn, John Fitch. Likewise, Instagram. I'm always posting wisdoms from the book and then upcoming books that I'm working on. And ultimately, I would say just find me on there, reach out to me. What I care most about is hearing what you do in your free time, maybe how to have more free time. But I just like talking to people about their hobbies and their time off and help them see the benefit of it. It's not just a nice to have, it's a crucial component of your creative expression. And I like to geek out on it. So don't be a stranger.
And thank you, entrepreneur, for listening to another episode of the StudioPTBO podcast. Ever so grateful for your attention. If you are a business owner, an entrepreneur listening to this podcast, even if you're a marketing rep, we have a lot of marketing reps lately who've been saying, hey, I've been listening to the podcast. Find us on the StudioPTBO Marketing Hacks group. It's a free group that we essentially have a ton of entrepreneurs in there. Love to see you inside of there. Make sure you check out John. You make sure you grab his book. And thank you, Neil. Thank you, John. And thank you for tuning into the StudioPTBO podcast. We will see you soon.